Hello ladies and gentlemen, welcome to round one of the AROC Racing Leagues Giulia GT4 Championship for 2026. It's great to be back on your screens, folks. Hello, one and all. Good evening. Thank you very much for tuning in this evening and for jumping in on some of the qualifying action that we've got here at Mugello. We are, of course, back at Mugello once again with another packed grid. Drivers, I must say thank you for your enthusiasm. Thank you for turning up. Thank you for watching along as well. Thank you to those of you who have been getting the practice in and taking part in the racing for our Giulia GT4s. Now this is certainly one that I've been looking forward to. It's been a little while since we've had a GT tier car. Kind of, well, I suppose we had the 4C GT3 last week. But aside that, ignoring that major oversight there, it's been a while since we've had some GT-style saloons running in our Alfa Romeos. Shall we go with that? Why don't we? Less than 20 minutes to go in qualifying this evening. The drivers are pretty much heading out for their first fast lap, so it's nice to jump in on such close action this time around. And we've got some of our rookie drivers back in on the action once again, likes of Nathan Mahoney. I believe we've got John Baker as well. We do indeed. Great to see Rob Whitney back as well. Anthony Marengi, newcomer, as well as Rosie Oliver. And then he said Rosie Hodgson. Then apologies, Rosie. Still used to the olden days. But Rosie Oliver is jumping in on the action once again. Great to see that she's been tempted back by this fabulous Giulia GT4, and it is certainly a proper race car, one that drivers do need to get to grips with. The GT4 versus the GT3, the grip levels aren't quite there in the same way that a GT3 tier machine would be, but what is there is all the power. So you have to be a little bit more careful running through those corners. Apparently it can be a little bit twitchy, and initially had some understeer that our guys behind the scenes were tuning out. Colin Keneath did a lot of the work on that front. But down the straight, you've got that nuclear bomb of an engine, don't you? It's such an impressive machine, that 2.9 litre V6. I'm very much ashamed to say I haven't actually driven a car, so Stelvio or Giulia, with that lump in. In fact, I haven't even driven any of the modern Maseratis. The closest I've got, in fact, to a modern Maserati will be the old 4.7 Quattroporte GTS, which I have driven. That was a fabulous car, but not quite related to anything to do with what we're looking at this evening. But great to be back, as I say, here at Mugello. Great mix of higher speed corners, followed by that massive start-finish straight, as well as a few other wide-open throttle parts of the circuit. Not really any properly slow corners. The slowest you're going to get through the corners is probably going to be running into Pelagio or heading through Luco, maybe Materassi as well. But other than that, everything's fast, everything's flowing. And it is a real test of the cars. We had a great time out last week. That's a fantastic camera shot there, running through the second Arrabbiata. We had a fantastic battle going on last week between the GTV6 3.2 machine, the front-wheel drive car, and the 4C GT3. The 4C GT3 definitely had the upper hand in terms of the cornering capabilities, and you'll see this being echoed in my magazine article that will come out with the April issue. So, as I said, 4C had the cornering ability, but that GTV6, that Buso V6, had an immense amount of straight line speed and was able to continue on a fantastic battle. So even if their driver was maybe a little bit off the pace and wasn't quite in as quick of a machine as the 4C drivers, they were still in the action. They were still going side by side and having a great old scrap at the front end of the pack, because the cars ended up being so evenly matched across the lap. It was fantastic. But that's just 1 week of fantastic V6 action. I'm sure we're going to get plenty more this evening as well. So over 15 minutes to go in this session. Currently, it's being led by Mr. Matt Daly at 155.0, and he leads by nearly 1 second, which is immense. Seeing a very interesting mix here of a mixture between the medium and the soft compound tyres. So great to see drivers switching it up in terms of strategy here, to see what might be the optimal tyre. I can see why the drivers are kind of anticipating maybe the soft might not make it through the lap. We do know it's a very high-speed circuit, obviously. Puts a lot of energy through the tyre compound here at Mugello, so that softer compound tyre will be pretty brilliant at the very start of the lap, but by the time it's headed through that second Arrabbiata and into the really twisty stuff towards the end of the lap, it might be just giving up the ghost a little bit. Those temperatures might just be getting a bit too high, whereas that medium, you can afford to head out on track and maybe not even just do one fast lap. You'd probably get a couple of fast laps in with a pretty comfortable tyre compound there, so I think that's why we're seeing such a mix of strategy. We have just seen Colin Keneath crossed the line there. I was waiting for confirmation of that, but Colin Knief crosses the line, loses out through Sector 1, but Sector 2 and Sector 3 are major improvements. In fact, Sector 2 is in fact a personal best and the fastest lap overall, sorry, the fastest sector overall of any driver out there on track. So it goes 54.7, finding 3/10 over the already very impressive Matt Daly there. So I think the front end of the pack is going to be rather interesting this evening, folks. But there's not just the front end of the pack to talk about, is there? There's so much going on out on track, which is so nice to see. John Baker looks to be under a little bit of pressure at the moment. Is currently running along in 17th, 159.72 beat. Who's behind him at the moment? Can't quite figure it out. Apologies, I'm not used to the new liveries just yet. That looks to be Andy Webb, potentially. That's the driver I'm going to go with there. Yes, that is Andy Webb, the white and pink livery there. That's the driver currently putting pressure on John Baker. You can see the drivers being a little bit apprehensive for the back end of the car, which is the right thing to do in this one. As I say, it has been a little bit twitchy in some regards, so I think drivers just playing it safe for the twisty stuff and then letting the engine do the work down the straight, which is a very sensible way to navigate things this evening, isn't it, folks? Hello to all of you watching, as I said at the start of the broadcast. Hello to those of you tuning in. Do let us know who you are, who you're supporting, what are your predictions for this race evening. If you've got any thoughts about last week's running, do let us know. I'll be sure to get it out on the broadcast as well. And let us know, in fact, maybe the most important question, do you have an experience with a Giulia? Maybe you drive one yourself, maybe you've owned one in the past, maybe you've had a go with a friend. Let us know. I want to hear about your Giulia Quadrifoglio experience, because they seem to be pretty immense, and it's one definitely on my bucket list at some point. We've in our family, we've actually been fortunate enough to have a couple of the generations of modern BMW M3, and I must say it's impressive, but it hasn't quite got the cornering panache that, say, the older BMW 3 Series has had, and the communication for the steering wheel is just non-existent, quite frankly. It's very much a letdown, and it's rather harsh, and it's become a big M5 basically as the M3. So I think the Giulia Quadrifoglio is in a really nice kind of point where it's still actually the compact sports saloon it should have been, and it obviously still on sale. Announced that the run for this series, Giulia and Stelvio, have been extended further still, which usually I think, oh, that's not a great sign, is it? You know, a car that is now 10 years old this year being extended. But you know what, I am so happy about that, because it's a fabulous car. The fact that it's this old and it still holds its own in its class, it still has plenty of fantastic things to say about it. And now it's one of its strengths. Its interior is certainly not as up to date as its rivals, but that's strength. That is absolutely strength. It's not plastered in tablets. It still looks traditional. It's still got a screen, but it's not massively oversized. And of course, it's got that fabulous chassis. I'm so glad they haven't moved away from this series car. And we thought this chassis might actually be going away. Give me lots of background to the car. Obviously, it's our maiden race with this car this season. Forgive me, but there was some talk, obviously, after Stellantis took over, that this platform was going to die a death, and we were going to start to see, you know, maybe a front-wheel drive-based replacement for the Giulia, that was slightly bigger, certainly slightly heavier and electrified. Now it seems to be the Giorgio platform is just being used more and more and more. It's now in Maseratis, it's even in some Jeep. It's definitely a far cry from what it is in front of us now, folks, but it's impressive to see that the platform is still going. Hopefully they're going to invest in it further down the line. We know the engine's getting some investment as well. We should see this car about for some time to come, so that is very exciting stuff indeed. But we're at least going to see it for another season's worth of racing, because while I've been nattering on, we've still had qualifying going on in the background. Knief still leads us with a 54.7. I'm going to go on board with him, though, because he's about to cross the line and does improve. A 54.5, had a fantastic bit of toe there from his rival Matt Daly, and that is going to make all of the difference. These cars do have a decent rear wing. They've got plenty of power, of course, but they have got a certain amount of downforce that will bring with it some drag. So that slipstream, I think, very much a helpful aid there to Colin Knief in taking that 154.5 as he goes purple through Sector 2 and Sector 3 on that last attempt. Really impressive stuff. We go back down to Matt Daly, though, who's currently running along in P2, heading through the Maserati left-hander right now, just behind Paul Millman, in fact, who's actually have to dip out of it. It looks like he had a bit of an off there, so has dipped out of the running, as has Matt Daly. In fact, we've got a few drivers heading back into the pits. I imagine they've got their first few laps in, and they're deciding, okay, got a baseline in, got a bank a lap in, which is really important to do. Now I think the drivers are suspecting little last-minute tweaks to the setup, chance for a bit of a breather, maybe a swig of water before you jump back in the car and get ready to go. Get yourself energised for a couple more fast attempts here at Mugello. Matt Daly's already out back on track, so maybe very minimal setup tweaks, maybe very minimal swigs of water, but he's back out on track and ready to go for another fast lap. He will have a warm-up to do first, so while he's doing that, let's have a look at who else we can see out on track. Well, great to see John Cole back with us as he was last week. He was certainly a bit door-to-door, elbows out in certain moments, but that's not just himself. I should phrase that a little bit better. Oh, well, there's some door-to-door. Is that commentator's curse, or is that just really poor timing? Sorry, John. What I was going to say, basically, is you were involved in some fantastic battles last week. Thoroughly enjoyed watching them. It was like old-school touring car stuff. Really enjoyed it. And he's just written off Paul Millman's Giulia. Yeah, I think Paul's actually still carried on, but it might affect the resale value of that one a little bit. Elsewhere, though, let's go to P6. Nathan Mahoney, one of our newcomers this season. I don't think he can see his own livery this evening. I think there's been a couple of issues with livery packs, and I think basically what we were going to say is don't worry, it won't make you go any faster if you've got a livery. Just drive on without it. But I'm pleased to report, Nathan, you've got the livery on the stream. That's what matters. You've got your livery. You look great on the camera. So no problems there. You're going to be able to race for the rest of the season with that fabulous green-based livery there. Really do like this one. Apologies, it is completely escaping me what this livery is based on, and I'm sure Andrew Whitehead is more than permitted to hit me across the head for not quite recognising the base pack of this livery. But one thing I didn't talk about, at least if I did, I only mentioned it very briefly. We had a great shot of it then. Let's have a look on the inside of the car, because what you should see, if the camera controls want to behave, Reeves done the manual camera control thing and it's gone wrong. Shock. Everyone is very... There we go. There it is. We're on board with Andy Craker, who has, if I can turn autocam off, there we go. I promise, you'd think I'd know how to use the setup after 6 years of commentating on it. But there we go, we can see Andy Craker. White, blue and red liveried car there. And if we go inside, you can see on the race suit, white, blue and red. How cool is that? What a neat little addition. That is something that Andrew Whitehead put some effort into there. I think we've just left Craker while he's having a bit of an issue out on track. So we'll go on board with Colin Knief as he's just gone purple sector 1. Now this could be very important for his run here. He's already doing very well. Has pole by half a second, or provisional pole at least by half a second. But on none of those laps, his previous 2 fastest laps, did he actually have a purple sector 1. So we could be seeing an even better lap here, or we might be seeing tyres that are being eaten up a little bit in the first part of the lap and maybe compromised for the second part because he is on those softs. He's pushing it as much as he dares. Sector 1 purple, Sector 2 purple as well, folks. It's a 34.650. Just a few more corners to negotiate now. Through the current tyre we go into the Blondettis, followed immediately after that. Daly's back in the pits. Daly's had a few issues out on track, I believe. I think my PC is also having a couple of issues, but looks like the broadcast is absolutely fine, which is the most important thing. And here we go. Knief navigates around the final corner before you run on to the back. Not even the back straight. Start finish straight now. Onto the loud pedal he goes. 7 minutes left on the clock. Just mere seconds left of this lap. Will it be an even better provisional pole? Let's see for Colin Knief as it crosses the line. It's a 154.118. He improves further still. That is blistering performance from Colin Knief there. 154.1, nearly a second faster than the next quickest car there. Matt Daly with an already impressive 55.0 is ahead of Andy Craker as well. We saw Craker in the mix in the last week's running as well. Now he's trying it out in the Juniors too. But let's have a look at what else is going on in the field. So as I say, Nathan Mahoney there running along in P6, and there is another driver that has a matching race suit there, as I was discussing earlier on. Followed by Miles Davis, the young driver there in P7 at the moment, as Nathan Mahoney actually goes up into P4. That's really strong stuff from Nathan Mahoney. I think Daly would have potentially had a shout at usurping Colin Knief, by the way, but actually was invalid on the last couple of laps, so he's not going to be able to push on with that attempt. Davis then jumps ahead of Mahoney, leapfrogs him into P4, demotes Nathan down into P5. This is still such an impressive run from one of our rookie drivers. He does have some sim racing experience in the past, but I don't believe he's been on his rig for a little while because his machine is, I was going to say his machine is on the older side, But given the prices of RAM and graphics cards in 2026, 10 series card is by no means bad these days. Hello to Laura, who is actually showing some support for Nathan this evening. Big thank you for tuning in, Laura. Go the number 42. I agree with that sentiment. He's going very well indeed this evening. So fantastic stuff from one of our rookie drivers, as I say. 5 minutes left on the clock. Let's see who else we can take a look at out on track. Anthony Merengue is currently running along in P11, heading down the start-finish straight. That car looks fabulous, I must say. Followed by Guy Swarbrick, currently running on the softs. Is just playing it safe through the corners at the moment by the looks of things. Might be on a bit of an outlap for the time being, but is in the 157. So that's not an outlap. In fact, he is bombing it through the Maserati left-hander as we speak. With the number 27 that he's ran for a good few seasons. These are where he's ran, in fact. Meanwhile, Rosie Oliver, great to see Rosie back here, running along in P14, and just clipping the grass there. Nearly gets a hold of it, but opts for the safer option of, I don't want to spin out in front of anyone else, I'll jump back into the pits and recollect myself, ready for what will be one or two final attempts in this qualifying session before we head into the racing in a few minutes' time. A reminder for anyone who's tuning in for the first time this evening, the formatting is a little bit simpler than the foreseen GTV Championship we had last week, because I don't have to talk about all the permutations of running different cars and swapping out, etc. All very simple. We're all in the same car. You turn up on a Wednesday evening every fortnight for this one, and you do a qualifying session, 25 minutes, and then you do 2 races. Nice and simple. You just do 2 races back-to-back with the reverse grid for the second one as well. So after a few minutes of this qualifying session, we're going to head into the racing action here at Mugello, and if last week was anything to go by, we are in for a real treat, folks. Very much looking forward to it as we see Andrew Whitehead. Haven't talked about it much so far this evening. He's been busy fighting a few Dropbox issues, I believe, overall this evening, but has just dipped into the gravel, which is an inopportune moment to jump in on the action with you, Andrew, so apologies. He's currently in the 1 minute 55s on a 155.5 ahead of Andy Craker. Daly finally cracking the 154s, and Andrew's currently running along in P3. So a quiet qualifying session for him overall so far, but still a good one nonetheless. Let's go for a quick roundup of our drivers then to see how they are getting on before we wrap things up for the qualifying session. So at the moment on provisional pole, and that is provisional with a grain of salt, is Colin Keneath with a 154.1, followed by Matt Daly in second place, 154.9. Andrew Whitehead, we've just mentioned, a 155.5, followed by Andy Craig, a 155.6. So very close running between those two, and Miles Davis is also involved in that, as is Nathan Mahoney, separated only by 0.06 of a second. That is really close running for Mahoney and Davis. I suspect we could be on for a great bit of battling between these two this evening. John Cole's in the mix there as well. Impressive to note that he's done this on the medium compounder tyre, so Nathan's done it on the soft, so he will be really impressive at the first part of the race if he opts for that soft into the racing. But regardless, I think we're going to be in for a great one. Andy Webb currently runs along in P8 in the 56s, followed by Jack Hodson. Then we have Alan Matthews in 157s. Not Nathan Mahoney, Anthony Merengue. The liveries are somewhat similar, so I think it'd be forgiven. Apart from the massive streak of white in the bottom of the car, that doesn't help. Nathan's livery is completely green. But then we have Steve Knight running along in P12. Really good qualifying session for Steve here this evening, and he's done it on the mediums. Followed by Guy Swarbrick in 13th. Then we have, that is going to be Rob Whitney in 14th. Great to see Rob back on our screens. Followed by Rosie Oliver in P15 at the moment. Then we have John Baker, P16. And then Paul Millman completing our 17 cars, completing the order this evening. I mean, given the reliability of some of them, we actually have more cars out on track than most Formula 1 races do these days. This is impressive stuff. Well done, and thank you, everyone, for getting involved. 90 seconds left on the clock. I'm going to continue to make comments about the current Formula 1 season for, I think, the rest of 2026, so do be warned about that one, folks. 1 minute 23 left on our clock. Keneath does still lead the charge. Here we go then, just seconds to go in this session. Let's have a quick rundown of who's going to be coming across the line next then. It looks like there's a little bit of latency on the timing system on the web page. And so apologies for that one, folks. The checkered flag has been waved. It's going to be Daly who crosses the line first, according to the system. I think that is actually wrong. So I'm going to do my best to guess where people are out on track. Let's see if it wants to catch up. This could be my internet. No, I don't think it is. I think we all look to be good on that front. Let me check to see what the broadcast is looking like. Apologies, folks. Lost my time. We get literally the worst moment to potentially lose the timing. Well, we do know that Andrew Whitehead has crossed the line. John Cole has done so as well. He remains P7. Let's just see who we can jump on board with as they bring an end to their laps. Hodson's bringing an end to their lap as Steve Knight crosses the line, jumps up ahead of Anthony Marenghi into P11. That's a really nice run there for Steve Knight in the end. Then we're going to have Andrew Whitehead, who has completed the running already. That is Rosie Oliver, I believe, up in front. And then we have Matt Daly heading round the final corner. Now onto the start-finish straight we go. And then this could be a pivotal lap here. So far, no improvements, but we have seen improvements in the final sector, making all the difference. He crosses the line, does Matt Daly, and stays in P2. As does Colin Keefe, doesn't improve in the end, but doesn't really need to. Just a couple more drivers out on track. It's Andy Craker, followed by Miles Davis, followed by Nathan Mahoney, who are the last couple of drivers to be putting any improvements on their time boards. Potentially, let's see, as it's going to be Miles Davis, number 13, that crosses the line next. Onto the start-finish straight we go. That is an abandon of the lap there for Andy Craker, which means it's just Davis left to see if he can push on towards Whitehead or Daly. 155.7 to beat remains with a 155.7 there. Top 5 for Miles Davis as Nathan Mahoney ends up bringing an end to qualifying there. So that's it for qualifying here at Mugello. We're going to catch you in a few minutes as we get ready for race 1. Well, here we are, ladies and gentlemen, on the grid and ready for race one. Let's have a quick rundown of our order. It's going to be Knief, Daly, Whitehead, Craig, Davis, Mahoney, Cole, Webb, Hodson, Matthews, Knight, Merengue, Swarbrick, Whitney, Oliver, Baker and Millman. Your 17 cars on the grid this evening. Just 10 seconds to go now. We're going to hear the revs rise for the first time for the sonorous 2.9 V6s as they battle it out, carrying all that speed down into the San Donato right-hander to start the lap. The 6 red lights on the gantry. We are away and ready to go, folks, or at least most of us are. Looks like a bit of a slow start potentially there for, who is that? I think that was Anthony Merengue who struggled to get the car off the line there, but Knief heads us down into that first corner. Meanwhile, is in the lead of this race, but is under threat from Matt Daly. Watch out, by the way, for Whitehead, who still has the inside here. Certainly not out of taking P2 here if he gets a particularly good run through San Donato. He nearly does end up filtering in on behind the driver in P2, though. There was major contact between pretty much everyone by the looks of things. There was door-to-door contact, which is what we like to see. We don't like to see any more than that. It's like 4-mile-an-hour impact between all the cars in the midfield there, by looks of things. So the crash indicator's just got absolutely ballistic for more than I've seen it ever really in memory. But everyone is continuing on, 1 minute down already as we have all the back end kicking out there for up to be Rosie Oliver's. Andy Craker has issues out on track, big issues there. In fact, his car is severely damaged. I think he's going to be able to continue on, but it is seriously lacking in terms of performance from the car as a result. Rosie Oliver, meanwhile, is in P5, is exploring the Italian scenery, which is certainly, I can understand that. I'd love to do that. It looks very beautiful, no matter where you go in that country, really, doesn't it? But maybe after the race. Is still running in P5, though. What a start for Rosie Oliver, then. What an improvement over the qualifying position. Let's see how this race shapes up for her. Oh dear, we have a big skirmish going on in the mid-pack there. That's coming out of the final corner and onto... No, it's not coming out the final corner. That is coming out of the Pelagio left-hander. Plenty of drivers involved there. Merengue, Matthews, Millman, Baker, I think, got clear of it, but we saw quite a few cars there in the mix. Unfortunately, not having an ideal lap one. Someone who's not having the most ideal lap one as well is Colin Knief. He still leads us, so things are going pretty well, but he's under ever-increasing pressure from Matt Daly, isn't he? As we head on to that start-finish straight, then Daly hunts him down in the slipstream. No more delta between the cars that are battling it, unlike last week, because it's all equal machinery. There's only differences in setup here as that V6 soars its way down to the San Donato right-hander once more. Knief has the upper hand, but goes a little bit deep into the corner. This is going to give Daly the inside line here for the first time in this race, of course. And Daly had a brief glance, but nothing he can do from this. Well, back the back end kicks out on Knief's car. I mentioned this has been happening with Giulia. Hasn't happened in qualifying very much. Happens at a pivotal moment in the race. Now, for a moment, I thought we were going to see Knief losing out to Daly, but Daly has his own issues and tumbles on behind Whitehead and Davis as well. That puts Matt Daly after a charge for the lead all the way near enough down out the podium. In fact, he's off the podium. This is disaster for Matt Daly. Now, this gets very confusing for Reeve once again. It's now disaster for Reeve. We've seen this in the past. When Miles Davis and Matt Daly battle each other, it's the yellow liveried car with a red accent against the yellow liveried car with a red accent. Now, the big determining difference is there is actually that much red on Daly's car. There's just a Pirelli logo primarily, and the wheels aren't red as well. So if I was at least fractionally competent commentator, I'd be able to tell the difference. But as you all know by now, folks, and those of you who are now just tuning in for the first time this season, you will soon find out. There is no competent commentator in the room, and Davis goes for the Formula Drift points. Can he catch it? He gets so close to catching out on the tarmac. He did very well not to lose it completely, it must be said. Car was vaguely pointing in the right direction, but that has compromised him big time there. I think the drivers have been getting rather familiar in qualifying with the car at a lower fuel load potentially, and obviously it's going to be a little bit more cumbersome, a bit more slow to react when it's got a race's worth of fuel on board. And Daly works his way back up into second once more. Let's look at what's going on elsewhere in this race though, because there is so much to talk about. That is, I must say, I do really enjoy the kind of solo setup that I've got going on here in terms of You know, I actually direct what the broadcast is doing, hence why it's a bit iffy sometimes, and obviously it's just myself here, and I really enjoy that. I genuinely, actually thoroughly enjoy it. But in all the broadcasts that I have done, sometimes just having someone else on the broadcast team in the background being able to tell you what's going on elsewhere in the race is jolly useful, because when you've got a brilliant set of race, a brilliant bit of pack action going on like we have this evening, it's so tricky sometimes to keep up with everything that is going on, because there is so much going on. I mean, just in front of us, we've got Andrew Whitehead on a recovery charge after a less than ideal lap 1, working his way past John Cole, but still very much under threat from John Cole in a fight for P8 now. So let's stay on board with this for a few moments as we head through the Maserati left-hander and down towards Casanova. Just ahead there is Steve Knight, but you can see Cole's so eager. This is what Cole did really well last week as well. He very well communicates to the driver in front that I am fast, I'm going to find a way past you, and you can just see him just eyeing up his moves, having a look at what tarmac might be spare, and there's some right in front of him that just presented itself already as Andrew Whitehead is offered into the gravel, is able to get back out on track, but very much compromised as a result of that brief visit to the Italian countryside himself. Down into P10 for Andrew Whitehead, not the start to the championship charge that he would be wanting, that is certain. Obviously Andrew Whitehead in the mix and often taking championships in the past couple of seasons, obviously puts an immense amount of work behind the scenes as well to keep the sim racing section going, but I am sure he did not want things to shape up this way so far this evening. Not the well, I'm sure if you're a McLaren Formula 1 driver, you're probably quite jealous of this championship campaign start, but anyone else probably struggling a little bit. Either way, we head to the front end of the pack once again. Knief has a bit of breathing space at this moment. He's setting purple sectors, doesn't have the threat of Matt Daly that he's had to defend against for the first couple of laps in this one, so can just settle into a bit more of a comfortable rhythm and just cruise along while we see what else is going on elsewhere on track. Rob Whitney is running along in P11 at the moment. Anthony Merengue is just behind, has a brief glance around the outside, swaps it around actually, so he was looking at the inside, goes to the outside and does him on the braking. Anthony Merengue, what a move there, late on the brakes, was actually busy just trying to get back into the inside line there and just got the move done before the corner. That's interesting stuff. That's a nice move for Anthony Merengue. Let's see what Rob Whitney can do to claw that one back potentially. Head towards John Cole, runs along in P8. Andy Craker's just behind there. Andy Craker having his own unfortunate start to this race. Of course, Steve Knight is running along really well, it must be said, up into P7. And Rosie Oliver, we haven't talked about this, is still in P4. Now, it's potentially a bit of a commentator's curse there, because Andy Webb is on the scene and is doing his utmost to perhaps reverse that. But what a return to form for Rosie Oliver. Rosie, I think, wouldn't mind me saying that in the past couple of seasons wasn't necessarily regularly where she would have wanted to have been. We saw flashes of some really strong pace and actually some really fine racecraft from Rosie over the past few seasons, but towards the end of her last stint in the AROC Racing Leagues, it unfortunately just wasn't working out quite her way. But what a return to form, Rosie. This is fantastic stuff. Hopefully this continues on and we're on for a great fight here, because I think we would all welcome our maiden female AROC Racing Leagues champion, wouldn't we? That would be fantastic to see, or at least race winner. I don't believe we've had that. Correct me if I'm wrong, if obviously AROC Racing Leagues history goes back a couple of seasons before myself, so it'd be very interested to see if I'm wrong on that front. But if not, hopefully Rosie can make that change. That'd be fantastic. She's doing a fantastic job of it so far, is putting in some very impressive lap times indeed, is currently matching Andy Webb for pace. Isn't quite there with the likes of Miles Davis, Matt Daly or Colin Knief, but is certainly on for a good one this evening. Let's have a look at what's going on elsewhere in mid-pack. Steve Knight was in P7, has just lost out on a couple of positions through those corners as Cole gets ahead of Craker and is going to be enjoying a battle with Craker now for the next couple of laps. So they continue this battle on despite working their way through the mid-pack action. 16 minutes left on the clock as we see side by side as Craker has a look down the inside there. Was that opportunistic? I'm going to let those more skilled in this decide than myself, but there was contact there. Cole off, and Cole gets back out on track. Oliver, meanwhile, is in P5, has lost a position to Andy Webb, and now we're going to have a sibling rivalry, folks. Isn't this intriguing? It is going to be Jack Hodson versus Rosie Oliver. I'd love to tell you a bit more, give you a bit more insight as to what's going on with the timing, but my question is, what is going on with the timing? It has completely left the chat, seemingly. It is struggling at the moment, probably because the server's so packed, but don't quite have any numbers for you in terms of lap times, in terms of sector times, so we'll just have to see what we can do. But Rosie Oliver, currently in P5, the back end looked quite eager to rotate there, but kept a good hold of things there, running along in P5, as we say, doing an almighty job. These cars don't look to have all that much suspension, do they? Obviously, they're a GT car, so they're not going to, Reeve, but certainly on the firmer side of things by the looks of it. We head into the mid-pack once again, though. Meanwhile, Knief is just controlling things very nicely at the front. Craker running along in P9, Anthony Merengue in P10, and Alan Matthews, we know, a very competent driver indeed. We've seen him take away many a podium race wins as well. Just, unfortunately, doesn't seem to be quite gelling with maybe this car or track combo or one or the other. Either way, things not quite going his way so far this race, running along in P11. Hopefully he gets a bit more out of the reverse grid action that will be coming up after race one is said and done. Andy Craig, meanwhile, is up into P8 as Steve Knight and Anthony Merengue have had a big collision. What a shame their races come to a bit of a premature end. Steve Knight very considerably moving out of the way as quickly as he can there. That was very apt of him to get out of the way that quickly of a narrow part of the circuit, in fact. So no harm, no foul outside of the incident between those two, which is good to see, and they are back underway as John Cole actually retires from the session. Not sure what's gone on there, but John Cole does dip out of the action for at least this race. Hopefully we'll have him back for race 2. 14 minutes left on the clock then. This is your top 2, and there's a big change here, folks. Didn't quite catch that. Apologies, there's everything going on in the mid-pack. Matt Daly ahead of Colin Knief now. That was a fairly sizable gap before, so I imagine some type of issue potentially for Colin Knief. See if Matt Daly now take charge of this race. This is really big news. I'm quite surprised by this, must be said. Knief just had such a measure of things in qualifying that I really wouldn't have thought he'd be under too much pressure. Great to see Cole back in on the action, so hopefully whatever issues he's had, he's got resolved. But yeah, Daly and Knief, my oh my, what a swap around here, as now Knief is going to be setting himself back into this qualifying mode, I assume, because now he just needs to unleash that one-lap pace that he did demonstrate in qualifying. Had such an advantage, let's not forget, folks. He just needs to have a bit more of that again to try and close up the gap to Matt Daly. Less than half race distance to go in this one, and then, folks, let's see how things are shaping up. Well, the front end of the action, we're still seeing this battle for P1. It's not quite an out-and-out fight just yet. Half a second is the gap between these two cars, but let's see what they can do as we head into the final stages of the race. There might be a bit more pace in the cars that's unlocked as the fuel tank gets later, so we'll see what they can do. But we're seeing Rob Whitney here under a bit of pressure from Steve Knight, from John Baker as well, and Paul Millman's going to be brought into the mix here. In fact, a couple more cars could be showing up on the scene as well, as we can see Whitney, the inside line opens up as Steve Knight has a look down there. Nowhere he can go just yet as we run through the Blondettis now. So that will assist as it gets a little bit narrow there. Whitney can just focus on getting a good run, keeping that momentum up through that final corner. That is pivotal here at this circuit, but down the inside, Steve Knight saw a gap and went for it. That's impressive stuff. That's bold stuff there. Bit too bold, though, as the front end of the car couldn't quite keep up with him, couldn't quite match that, and he ran wide into the gravel. That scrubbed off all his momentum, lost him not one, but two, maybe three positions as we run down the start-finish straight, as we now see it's going to be Millman versus Knight. Whitney's back up into P10, Baker promoted to P11. Millman passed, as I say. Steve Knight has another attempt at a lunge down the inside there. That is going to be a bit too brazen. I think that move wasn't on, I don't think. I mean, luckily nothing happened. But, yeah, the car in front was very much occupying that inside line there, very much the corner of the car in front. So I'm glad that there was no major contact there. I mean, it is a really tricky braking zone to judge there at the run into Sant'Anato, to be fair, because you're carrying all that speed off the final corner of the last lap into long straight as well. Then you're heading downhill as you head into that braking zone. And these cars, they do need to be, these drivers have, last week they were in cars that were lighter and, well, particularly in the case of the 4C as well, that were a bit grippier. That really can go quite late on the brakes. These GT4s, I mean, there are some specs, as I say, it's rival in the scene, the BMW M3 competition. There are certain special editions that which really aren't far off GT4 spec on the road. So GT4 isn't, you know, a massive departure from what you might actually see from a Giulia Quadrifoglio on the road. So it's no surprise, perhaps, that the braking zones are a little bit more sensitive in this one. Oh dear, side-by-side contact then between Steve Knight, between Nathan Mahoney. Nathan Mahoney, who had a really strong start to the weekend. Unfortunately, this race hasn't quite gone his way so far. In 14th is Nathan Merengue, up into 13th after that one. And that is an unfortunate turn of events there for Steve Knight. P10, a lap or so ago, now finds himself tumbling down to 15th. Rosie Oliver as well, tumbling slowly through the order, unfortunately, after what was a really immense fight at the front end of the order. Hopefully the spurs are on, though, and inspires her to keep cracking at it, because I do think we've got some really good results coming for Rosie Oliver this season, with particularly that start to this race's pace. There must be said that to be running along in P4 with a really strong field, a really packed field as well, is impressive. As, oh dear, John Baker, and that is going to be Rob Whitney. John Baker and Rob Whitney having a big off running into the first corner. That's the Sant'Anato right-hander where it's all gone wrong for John Baker and Rob Whitney, as they are able to collect themselves, get back out on track. But you can't afford to be making these mistakes, having these issues as late into the race as they are having now, which is a terrible shame. This promotes Millman into 10th now, Merengue into 11th, maybe 12th, though, as Mahoney, who's now been promoted up a couple of spots, is fancying his chances at taking the position. Let's go side by side then as we run down through Casanova into Savelli, and then the first Arrabbiata, followed immediately after it's the second Arrabbiata. Mahoney stays behind for the time being, but is, I'm sure, going to try and push on later into the race as we head into the final few laps now. Medium tyres, I should add, for every car out on track this evening. Seven minutes left on the clock. Then I just have a thought, as I was just listening in the background. Well, one thing I am having a thought of is this battle for the race lead, which is certainly on the cards now. As we also have a battle between P11 and P12. We've got a battle for P1, P2. I've just clocked on as to what this engine noise very much reminds me of, or this field of cars. Because in GT3, you know, there's some V6s, as we actually have, we're going to have three wide, had down, start, finish straight here, as we see Merengue and Millman go side by side. Mahoney's staying behind Millman, actually, to benefit as much as he can from that slipstream. He's going to gun for the inside here. Will he get it is another question. He's going to have to. Oh, no, he won't. He's going to back out of it. In fact, he's going to wait for another opportunity. Is Mahoney, but he's very much on the scene here as Millman takes back the position. Merengue had a great run onto the start-finish straight, and for a moment looked pretty settled on taking the spot in P10, but Millman, with some really strong driving there, actually manages to cling on to it, as I don't think there was contact between the two then as they ran over the curb. It just looked like it. But yeah, Mahoney stays in P12, Merengue 11, Millman up in the 10th spot. Points on the cards there, as Steve Knight actually back in on the mix here in 13th after the issues of John Baker and Rob Whitney a lap or so ago. But 5 minutes left on the clock now, and I was just thinking, obviously GT3, GT cars, you get a variety of engine noise, you get a variety of engines, and Formula 1, it all sounds very... I was trying to think of what this kind of general engine noise we're hearing in the background reminds me of, and it's the relatively large swept capacity for a race car, 2.9 V6 with the turbocharger that likes to rev out a little bit. What else has that? Then it occurred to me, Formula 2. It sounds like a Formula 2 field, because everyone's in the same kind of turbo V6 car, which is slightly larger than the 1.6 in the F1s. So yeah, that's what this noise reminds me of. As we go side by side there, Mahoney and Merengue there. Merengue does well to keep it on the tarmac. In fact, as we see, it's going to be Jack Hodson versus Andrew Whitehead now. Around the outside goes Andrew Whitehead. Beautiful stuff there, Andrew. That was on the run through the first corner, through Sant'Donato and into Luco we go. There's potentially a look down the inside for Hodson there, but Whitehead on a slow but sure recovery here. We haven't really clocked this so far, but up into P5. What a drive this is shaping up to be for him, with that fantastic overtake as well. But meanwhile, at the front end of the pack, there is very much a fight going on for the race lead, folks. Less than 5 minutes to go in this one, as I say. And Daly leads the charge. Question is for how long, as this is a fight that has been brewing for a little while. So far it's been settled with slight skirmishes through various parts of the lap. Now it's going to be settled with out-and-out pace, as there we can see Knief has a look at going around the outside in it, well, as the exit of Pelagio, where he already glanced to the other side of the circuit there, had a great run out that left-hander there. We now run through the Blondettis, has to stay in single file there pretty much, but is going to stay in that slipstream, which could be crucial as he tries to carry that momentum through the final corner and onto that start-finish straight now. Already he's feeling eager, isn't he? Look at him gunning for the outside line there. Daly's going to wash out wide to try and defend as he does so there, but Knief is going to be very much in that slipstream unless Daly tries to break it, as he has done there. So Knief follows him to the side of the circuit, and they're now going to snake their way down to Sant'Donato as they start the next lap of this race. There was something else I wanted to look at out on track, but that kind of escapes me at the moment. There's something to do with this, I think. There you go. But let's have a look at the race lead. There's in fact Millman and Merengue having a few changes of position there. I think there's been another skirmish, but at the front end of the pack, it's all clean battling. Through Luco we go. It's still Daly leading the charge with just 3 minutes to go in this race. And once again, I do want to say a big thank you to all of you for watching along this evening. Numbers are looking really strong, so let us know if you've had any experience with a spicy Giulia of any variety in the real world. Do let us know what you're thinking of the race weekend so far. Let us know what you thought of last weekend as well. Thank you for all tuning in and watching along for what should be a fantastic evening's worth of racing. We've already had near enough half of it. I'm pleased to report we've got the reverse grid coming up as well. But Daly so far has the measure on Colin Knief. I daren't glance away from this one because it is so close. I know it will happen as soon as I look away, but I might go for it in just a moment. Let's see. Well, Davis is looking pretty settled in P3. He's making habit of that this season over the last week as well. It was just a quiet and comfortable P3 of the car to Miles Davis here. So well done to the young driver for keeping a calm, level head there, and he will be rewarded with a strong result, I suspect. Midfield action seems to have petered out just a little bit now, as Knight and Merengue are still going to be going toe-to-toe until the very end in this one, I suspect. As Merengue is now having a look at finding a way past Steve Knight. But we head through the final corner once more. This time Knief stays much tighter to Daly, doesn't opt for that wide run early into the corner. He just follows him on that run to the exit of the corner this time around. There is Guy Swarbrick running along in P16 there, as Knief closes up in that slipstream. We start the new lap of this race. They're in the 55s at the moment, these drivers. Will that change? Well, Knief is going to try and put one change in place, that's for certain. As he looks around the outside, will he get the move done? He's going to go later on the brakes. They are wheel to wheel, axle to axle, but it's going to be front to rear axle there, as Daly just about keeps a hold of things for the time being. This is fantastic stuff at the front end of the pack. Meanwhile, in P12 and P13, we're still seeing positions trading between Merengue and Knight. A fantastic battle going on there as well. Millman in 11th, and Mahoney finally clearing this pack and separating himself out. Craker heads into P6 as he goes side by side with Jack Hodson as well. Nose out in front as they start their lap. towards the end of this race. Hodgson has the inside, though. He's going to have a great run into Luco unless Craig can do anything, and he can. Completing the overtake then, Craig heads through Luco and takes P6 in the end. Going to the front end of the action once more, though, Daly leads the charge by about a car length once again, has the measure of things by the looks of it. 40 seconds left on the clock in this one. We are going to have effectively the penultimate lap in just a moment's time. So not long left for these drivers to scrap it out for the race lead. This is exciting stuff, it must be said. Back end kicks out on Daly's car then. Could that cost him a little bit of time potentially? I tell you who has got some fantastic seats for this one. It's Guy Swarbrick just behind there. He's just been lapped and he's got a fantastic view of the action unfolding out in front of him as we have less than 10 seconds left on the clock now. Back towards the end of the lap we go once again. Meanwhile, it is also close. It looks to be somewhat settling between the rest of the pack now, which is very considerate of you drivers. Thank you for giving me just one high-stakes battle to focus on towards the end, because I do find it, as I say, you know, I feel quite sorry for some drivers sometimes put on a great show for us, but we just don't see it when we've got pack grids like this, because there's so much action to pick from. But we have now started the final lap of this race. This time the gap between the two is a little bit bigger. Could Daly be looking more settled? We will just have to wait and see. Meanwhile, Rob Whitney gets ahead of Anthony Merengue this time around. Rob Whitney back up into 14th. As I say, elsewhere it's all looking somewhat settled now. The order looking pretty comfortable, as actually Andrew White is going to try and change things late on in this one. Knief not able to close up on Daly just yet, but is certainly not far behind. Meanwhile, Andy Webb versus Andrew Whitehead. Into that first corner we go. Whitehead takes a slightly tighter run through the San Donato right-hander. We run up towards Luco once again, and he gets closer still. Nowhere really on the lap at this part of the track, at least, for him to find a way past. The track is very narrow indeed. He's going to have to wait for a later opportunity in this lap to make the difference and get the car out in front. But Daly leads us on through. Up towards the Corentano we go once again, with 4/10 left in terms of gap between these two. This time things look just that a little bit more settled, but certainly anything can happen. We've seen, involving Matt Daly, as I mentioned last week, crazy things happen to race leaders on the final lap here at Mugello. At that time, Daly didn't have enough fuel in the car, but this time I'm sure he's not making that mistake once again. He certainly doesn't look like it. He looks like a confident driver. He looks like a driver who knows that his car is going to do everything underneath him, and it certainly has. It has put up a great fight against a worthy adversary in the form of Colin Knief. That fight isn't over yet by the looks of things as we head into that final corner. Knief takes a tighter run there. The back end steps out for Matt Daly. This could go down to the wire, folks. It could be a photo finish. It becomes a drag race in effect. I think it's a drag race that Matt Daly is going to win in the end, though, as they cross the start-finish line. They take the checkered flag. Matt Daly takes race one victory. Colin Knief, critically close second there. What a drive between those two there. What a race, what a battle. Thank you, folks. We've got a bit of a wait till anyone else comes across the line. It's going to be Miles Davis, though, who navigates that final corner, heads down the start-finish straight, and takes the checkered flag. Rounding out your podium, Miles Davis. A quiet but really strong battle for podium there, as Andy Webb and Andrew Whitehead complete the top 5 overall then. A battle brewing. I think a couple more laps. We could have been in for a great one there, as Andy Craker brings it home in P6, followed by, in fact, very closely followed by Jack Hodgson in P7. Alan Matthews, in the end, a few points to add to his tally, so things did improve overall in this race, brings it home in P8. And then a bit of a wait for Rosie Oliver on her return. Takes points, which is really impressive stuff. Well done, Rosie. A few points to start off your championship hopes with there. Bit of a wait then to Nathan Mahoney, who heads onto the start-finish straight after plenty of skirmishes in this race, but he has shown some great pace in qualifying in particular and at the start of this one as well, so let's watch out for Nathan in race 2. Could be a bit of a surprise for us as we head into that reverse grid race. Then we have Paul Millman crossing the line in P11, followed by Steve Knight. These guys were protagonists in quite an action-packed battle, shall we say, throughout the past few laps of this race. Then we have John Baker crossing the line, followed by a bit of a wait for Anthony Merengue. I think I've just missed them. Oh no, I haven't. We're going to get some Matt Daly victory donuts in the end here, which is great to see. In fact, you know what? I think I have missed them, which is a shame. We might get some drifts. There we go. We're going to get some drifts, but we're also going to get Merengue crossing line, followed by Rob Whitney. John Cole, who stayed in it, as well as Guy Swarbrick there. Well, that brings an end to race 1, folks. Wasn't it exciting? As I say, it does bring an end to the first race. Don't be disappointed, though. After some Matt Daly drifts, we are going to get ready for race 2, our reverse grid race. So don't go anywhere, folks. We'll catch you in just a few minutes. Well, here we are, ladies and gentlemen, on the grid and ready for race 2, our reverse grid actions. Let's take a look at what that grid shapes up to be then. Jack Hodson and Andy Craig complete row 1, followed by it's Andrew Whitehead and Andy Webb on row 2. Then we have Miles Davis and Colin Keith completing the 3rd row, followed by Matt Daly and Alan Matthews, row 4. Then we have Rosie Oliver, Nathan Mahoney on row 5, followed by Paul Millman, Steve Knight, John Baker, Anthony Marenghi, Rob Whitney, Guy Swarbrick and John Cole. Here we go then, the revs rise, less than 10 seconds to go already for the 2nd time and final time this evening. It's 6 red lights on the gantry and we will be going racing here at Mugello. There's a false start, I think, for Steve Knight by the looks of things there. So he will have to serve a bit of a pit lane infringement, a bit of a penalty that he'll need to jump in and stop for, so that unfortunately brings a stopper to his race already. But Andy Craig runs down into that first corner. Jack Hodson is going to be his nearest challenger, takes the insider. Colin Keneath late on the brakes, hangs it round on the outside and makes plenty of positions up in his attempt to claw his way back to the race lead in another attempt to try and take victory this time round. Craig though still leads the charge. Hodson has the inside as we get through towards the Maserati left-hander in just a second. Keneath drops down into P4. Whitehead is up into P3 as there we go. It's Daly versus Keneath. This time it's for P4, never mind for P1 this time around, as Hodson nearly finds himself into the gravel. This is electric stuff, folks. Just look how close everyone is. It seems to be a little bit cleaner so far on this start. That might be the commentator's curse potentially coming into effect in just a moment, but so far so good, it must be said. Nathan Mahoney up into 8th then, making up 2 positions on this race start as we run through the Arabiatas and bring an end to the first lap after the twisty stuff is all said and done. Here we go then. Craig still leads us, has a really good turn of pace as we know. Rosie Oliver having issues at the start of this one, but it looks like a small visit off track might have cost us some time, as has John Cole. The back end kicks out for John Cole. Cold tyres, full tank of fuel. The car isn't going to be driving as it was towards the end of race 1. There's going to be a lot more tricky conditions to negotiate for these cars, and John Cole tumbles down to P14 as a result. Matthews is in P15 and Baker and Knight obviously had that poor start that might cost him in terms of penalties. We'll see in a moment. So Knight is down in 17th for the time being. But here we go then, the final corner of the lap. Let's head back onto the start, finish straight. You can see Craig has built up a nice advantage already, but someone who hasn't is Jack Hodson. Whitehead, Daly and Keneath are just behind, and that slipstream train now comes into effect. Whitehead's going to be the first driver to break the slipstream as he goes side by side, gets the nose out in front, gets the move actually done before we head into the San Donato right-hander, but later on the brakes, Jack Hodson claws it back. Has he gone too deep into the corner? We're going to have to find out. He does open the inside of the San Donato, but this gives him crucially the inside for Luco coming up in just a moment. So he claws onto it somehow. Jack Hodson, a remarkable recovery to defend that position after it looked like it had gone. But there we go, that is some fantastic racing there, as Whitehead now is going to be under pressure from Daly, from Keneath. So I think Andrew was really hoping he could have got that move done before we headed into this part of the lap, because now that he hasn't, he's got some very fierce competition indeed, beginning to put pressure on his rear bumper as we head on to the the first full lap of this race. This is fantastic news, by the way, for Andy Craig, because what this means is that he can build up a gap. He can settle into a bit of a rhythm whilst all the other front runners are busy squabbling with each other, busy costing each other time. He can focus on getting into a rhythm, pushing on forward, building an advantage so that when any challenges do arise later on, he's in a better position to bring it home on the top step. We'll have to see. That is in 20 or so minutes' time. Plenty of racing to go on before then, and we are certainly seeing that as we head on to the start. Finish straight now, as it's going to be Whitehead who gets ahead of Hodson, who has an iffy run. Sorry, we're not even on the start finish straight, folks. Apologies, we're getting that excited. We're heading into the Blondettis in just a moment, but the same still applies as we see Hodson compromised on the run there. Whitehead's in second, Daly in third, Keneath in fourth, and Keneath might be a little bit more focused on what's going on directly behind him, because now it's going to be Hodson versus Davis battle, as Davis goes for a run down the inside. We didn't catch that on camera, but I thought that I was going to see something based on how he was looking out of the Blondettis, and we certainly did. Really strong run for Miles Davis there, back up into the top 5. A great way to start the race. But Whitehead's running in P2, Daly in P3, and Keneath just behind in P4 already, folks. And I'm pleased to report for the first time this year, the comms box, the virtual comms box, is getting warm, as Daly has a look down the inside, goes for it late on the brakes and gets that move sealed. That's a really strong overtake from Matt Daly there. Well done to the car in yellow. And it's not over yet for Andrew Whitehead potentially, because now Colin Keneath is fancying his chances finding a way past. And certainly I think Andy Craig might be watching that with a slight bit of fear, because we do know that Daly has some immense pace. Obviously took the race 1 victory overall. This is a redemption drive for Andy Craig, who had an iffy race 1, a race 1 he'd rather forget. Now he's got a 1.7 second advantage to try and maintain, or at least try and use to hold on to the race lead, whilst Daly is hunting him down fiercely. This is going to be a fantastic, enthralling battle going on between these Giulia GT4s. What a fantastic bit of racing machinery it is, isn't it, folks? It just looks magnificent. Why didn't we see it in real-life GT programs more often? Why didn't we see it potentially with the coupe variant? Well, we know why, the economics behind it, but what a shame, what a cruel world it is when cars like this don't get to show themselves off more often, because they are fabulous machinery, fabulous pieces of machinery being driven by some fabulous drivers this evening, it must be said. One of them might be rather wishing I didn't say that, because that is the commentator's curse into effect there, as unfortunately Swarbrick finds himself in a wall. He's able to continue on, he's in P15. What a shame, that is a lovely livery. Oh dear, there's contact between the two. Merengue is round and is going to be able to continue on, but is not. Unfortunately, this race weekend not quite going the way that the GTV and 4C1 did last week. I think hopefully he is not put off the Giulias by this and will continue on and pick up some points later on the season. We've got plenty of rounds to still go in this one. 19 minutes left on the clock then. Putting pressure on Whitehead at the moment as we run down towards San Donato. Once again, has plenty of momentum behind him. He's going to draw out side by side, but that slipstream disappears as soon as he does that. So the straight line advantage somewhat evaporates. We head round the right-hander of San Donato. Can Knief get the nose out in front for Luco? He can indeed. I don't think that move's sealed yet though, because has the inside for the right-hander running down towards Maserati? It does. Andrew Whitehead, and there we go. There wasn't enough track for Knief. Knief ends up on the gravel. It costs him big time. It costs him track space, obviously. It costs him momentum, that small correction there, and that means that Davis might be closing up on him and Whitehead secure for just that little bit longer. Apologies, folks. I was just opening the window on the virtual comms box. Very much necessary, as it turns out. I'm complaining about something I'm very pleased to be seeing taking place. I'm so glad that the miserable British winter has disappeared, and we're going to get some nice warmer weather. It's already inspired me to get my little Mito Quadrifoglio back out and recommissioned. So far, I've polished out one of the dents from its impact with its impact with an ambulance, with an ambulance's impact with it, which is something I'm clearly still not bitter about in the slightest. Polished that out. Still needs a bit of PDR work as well. Hopefully that'll be all sorted. And I've just been driving it. I borrowed it to a friend. I lent it out to a friend in Manchester. He took it down the M62 and back for me, and he seemed to enjoy it. So hopefully I've got a big shopping list for it. So I'm hoping to start chipping away a couple of bits, make it just that little bit nicer to drive, improve on it in some way. Actually, the wastegate adjustment this weekend, if you own a Giulietto with the 1.4 multi-air or a Mito with the 1.4 multi-air, check that little rattling noise that you're hearing as you let off the boost. I know this is totally not related to racing but you know, that little rattling noise that you might hear could be your wastegate actuator either failing or just being a little bit slack and it's kind of backed off. And what you can do is you can release a circlip. Well, you take off your turbo heat shield when the engine's cold, of course. Release a circlip, pop off the actuator arm, twist it round clockwise, 2 or 3 turns is probably the safe bet. Put it back on and then see if it improves things, stops that rattling, and basically the turbo should boost a lot happier. It shouldn't be surging. The big symptom for me was you go foot down on a motorway stretch or on the Autobahn, for example, and between 3,000 and 4,000 RPM you'd feel the torque dip before it picks back up. Twisted that actuator around, no longer a problem. So do that, folks. Make sure you check that everything's all right. Little bits like that is what I'm doing to my meter to get it recommissioned because we've got such lovely weather. There we go, that was that tangent. 15 minutes to go in this race then, as you've been watching the front end action here. We can see Nathan Mahoney is doing a really strong showing here this evening. All of a sudden, where's this pace come from? I mean, we had seen flashes of fantastic pace, but now he's rivaling Miles Davis, running along in P6. Actually is matching Miles Davis in terms of overall best lap time, actually currently faster by the tune of about a second. So might be in that slipstream looking to set up an overtake here. I do love, you see the exit out of that final corner, and actually on the timing board I see the pit indicator coming up because drivers taking such a wide exit and using that part of the tarmac. The game assumes, oh, you must be going into the pit. Obviously not the case. It's a funny aside regardless. This is a really impressive showing for Nathan Mahoney, it must be said. Newcomer to the series, and he's jumped right in, and it looks like he's been here for a few seasons already. He's already hit the ground running with some really strong pace. Great to see another strong driver added to our roster. Less than 15 minutes to go though. Rosie Oliver's having a couple of issues, but looks like that was at the San Donato. She is able to pick things up and hopefully will be on for some points again. But let's go back to the front end of the pack here. Andy Craker set up a start to reverse grid. That was ideal. It was perfect. It's exactly what we want to do in a reverse grid race. Build up a few second gap, let all the other front runners who've worked their way up slow themselves down with a bit of infighting. He did do that, and it was only a 1.8 second gap in the end between himself and Daly when Daly eventually broke free from that. So he's done very well to keep ahead of Daly for quite so long in this race so far. 5 laps in, just over 10 or 11 minutes in, we've still got about 15 or so minutes to go. Maybe a little bit less than that. So it will be a tall order to keep Daly behind for that amount of time, but Andy certainly has the pace. I'm sure he's going to put on a great show for us this evening. Here we go, we see side by side just in the background there, Knief versus Whitehead as we run down the start finish straight into San Donato we go. Whitehead has the inside. Will it be a repeat once again? It could well be, as Knief has a really impressive knack for keeping the momentum up around the outside. We saw that in the final corner in the last race, and he's done it here in race 2 as well. Has a look down the inside at Luco. There was a gap and he went for it. There we go, Knief up into third after quite a while, so a really strong effort from Whitehead there, and I don't think this battle's over yet. And there's plenty of battling going on elsewhere through the field here. We see John Cole and Alan Matthews looking pretty close together at the moment. John Baker is currently closing up on Rosie Oliver by the looks of things, running along in P13. And there we see the aforementioned Rosie Oliver actually saying, nah, forget about it. Oh dear, no, commentator's curse. Never mind, I was about to say, he's busy performing overtakes to make sure that doesn't happen. But there we go, it's happened. Sorry, Rosie. Inopportunistic timing there, perhaps. Either way, Andy Webb runs along in P7. Yeah, anyone who's returning to the AROC Racing Leagues, I don't know if you remember just to the extent to which my commentator's curse is all-encompassing. It will catch you. It will catch you out. Be warned. Either way, 12 minutes left to go in this one now. And Matt Daly and Andy Craker are still scrapping it out. Now, I would like actually, for a brief moment, to get a little bit nerdy. Those of you who might be watching along who know a thing or two about computers, you remember throughout last season, I was starting to have, every now and again, I'd have these issues where my PC just seemingly couldn't keep up. It would just become a laggy kind of PowerPoint presentation with the stream. I've changed nothing about the hardware on my machine. It's still an RTX 3080, which I seemingly have a collection of for some reason. But as we cross the start-finish line to start the next lap, we've crossed the halfway marker in this one. But what I did do last season, as it transpires, oh dear, Daly's carrying an immense amount of pace. I've got to stop myself boring you all to death there with Daly looking poised to get the overtake done halfway down the straight. It wasn't to be in the end, but he's now got front axle to rear axle there, so Craker can't exactly close him off. He's very much making his presence known as Daly has a look down the inside, does Craker, and there we go, 0.2 of a second is the gap once again. This is looking like a very close fight now, folks, as we have around about 10 minutes left in this one. There we go then, they run through Luca, through Maserati now as well. and they are still in the same order, but I think Daly's looking poised for an overtake this time around, wouldn't you say? But yeah, last season I replaced my monitor. Inadvertently, I'd upgraded to a very nice high resolution 185 hertz IPS thing. Very nice. I've been well overdue for a monitor upgrade for quite some time now, and turns out that the 3080 with CSP and everything has the power to run a Assetto Corsa at 185 hertz instead of my old 75. As we can see, Daly has a look around the outside there, has better momentum. It must be said as we run through Pelagio. Almost see a fight of yet formation of Giulia's trying to hunt down Andy Craig there, as Knief is jumping in on the action as well. Daly has a look down the inside, around the right hand of the Garantano, into the Blondettis we go. And Blondettis give Craig a little bit of respite there. But Knief is now on the scene too. This is fantastic stuff as our top three, our podium, begins to scrap it out. Through the final corner we go. And on to that start-finish straight. Craig maybe a little bit compromised there. Momentum not quite with him, as it has been with Daly and Knief. Daly very much looks on a charge now. Is already faster without much slipstream, really. Side by side we go. It becomes a drag race, and it's a drag race that Matt Daly is winning. It's going to have to be a case of who can go later on the brakes. We run into that first corner then. In fact, it might not even need to be. Oh no, it could well be, because Craig heads down the inside there, goes later on the brakes, but goes deep into the corner, and that could cost him quite a bit of time here. Could potentially make him lose out to Knief as well, unless he can hang on to it through Luco. He can. Craker with a recovery there. That is remarkable stuff. And Knief's on the scene too. He's going to be near enough side by side with Daly. I think Knief's fancying his chances not only a P2, but a race victory here as well. Don't count out Knief. And in the background, laying in waiting, by the way, if anything what's happened between these top three that are in within 1 second, is Andrew Whitehead. If anything goes on the front end there, do not count Andrew Whitehead out of this one. Plenty else going on elsewhere in the pack, by the way. John Cole and Alan Matthews are enjoying a battle at the moment. But here we go at the top end. It's 3 cars scrapping it out for race and victory. If this isn't enough for an advert, folks, do get involved in the AROC Racing Leagues. Plenty of avenues to do that. We've got our email set up, which you can see in any issues of alfaromeo driver that have fallen through your doorstep recently. We're also a section, so you'll find us on the website too. If this is an advert, I don't know what is, because we get this now very regularly, just immense battles between the top-end drivers, and not just the top-end drivers, everyone else in the pack as well. But it's not often that many racing series can say, oh yeah, we had a battle for the race lead going down to the wire all within a second for most of the race's duration. It is brilliant stuff that we are treated to here. But now Craker looks to be settled in the race lead. Daly and Knief are still very close, so do not count them out as they get ready to start the next lap. 7 minutes left on the clock. What a fantastic race this has been. But there we go. Knief closes up once more on that slipstream. Craig looks slightly slower, it must be said, compared to Daly as well. So Daly could be dragging along Knief with him, and they might be working together and going for a two-pronged attack here. Let's see if that is the case. No, they stay in single file for the time being. We run into that first corner. Craker looks to be a little bit more secure this time around. In fact, Knief takes a slightly wide run into that corner. It might cost him some time. But going back to what I was looking at before, as Daly gets closer still. So it turns out this high refresh rate screen that I had that was causing the issues for last season, well, the card was capable of running 185 Hz in Assetto, so it was using its full. Oh dear, as Craker takes too much of a bite out of the grass there. It just runs wide of his own volition and ends up into the gravel. What a shame. A driver that has been doing an immense job of leading this race, putting up a fight to Matt Daly, eventually relents, eventually shows one small chink in the armour and ends up in the gravel. What a shame for Andy Craker, who's now side by side with Andy Webb and in P6. This promotes Mahoney to P5, Davis to P4, then the podium looks like this. Daly versus Knief versus Whitehead in the top 3 in this one. As Andy Webb and Craker have had it coming together, in fact, they've had contact, and it goes from bad to worse for Andy Craker. I don't think he's wanting to continue on in this one, which is a terrible shame. Andy Craker, after fighting for the race lead, retires from the session. What a shame that the season has started this way for him, because he certainly has the pace. That much is clear. There we go. This battle for Alan Matthews and John Cole's been going on in the background in the meantime, it must be said. Cole is currently behind Matthews, but we've seen it change around. We might see it change around again as Cole, in fact, goes off into the gravel. My commentator's curse continues on. So, folks, if you'd like to put in your application in between this round and the next to not be featured on camera by myself, I'll bear that in mind, because I imagine a few of you won't want me to pan the camera to you anymore, because it seems to be when they do that, things go wrong. Either way, we head back to the front end of the action. Daly versus Knief, as we saw plenty of in race 1. And I'm going to bring up the monitor thing again, because every time I bring up the monitor thing, some brilliant stuff happens out on track. So hopefully that happens again. But yeah, so it turns out that 3080 was trying to render the game at 185 Hz, which it was doing. It was running at 185 FPS, but taking every single resource from the computer in order to do that. So asking it to also broadcast OBS, it wasn't having it. It wasn't happy. I have got a home server, which has a 6-core i7 and another 3080 in fact, so I was kind of thinking, if it doesn't improve itself for this season, what I'll do is I'll set up a capture card, go old school, and get that to be the streaming box, which I might still do for reasons of stability, to be fair, because it's sat there doing nothing. But figured out the issue. Yeah, what I've done is I've just V-synced it. I've just capped the FPS of the game to 60, because you guys on YouTube can't get any more than 60 on a live stream anyway. And lo and behold, all of the issues have been fixed, and not only that, it's notably cooler when the PC turns on in here now, because, well, there isn't a 3080 pumping out a million tons of heat. There we go, there's a useless aside that none of you really asked for, but we have 5 minutes left to go in this race. Now, Rob Whitney's just had a few issues, which is a shame. That takes him out of the points, but he, I am sure, will be able to have another crack at things as we head further into the Giro D'Italia that we are enjoying for both championships, this season. Of course, the GTV and 4C, and Giulia GT4 will be sharing a calendar once again, as they have done for the past few seasons in our both championships. And this time, it is a circumnavigation of some fantastic Italian racing venues, as Knief is looking to circumnavigate his way around Matt Daly here, heading on to the start-finish straight. We are once again 3.5 minutes on the clock, and Daly still has the upper hand, has the nose out in front, has the inside line here, but Knief has the more momentum. He's going to have to try and hang it around the outside, but Daly, wise to it, of course, goes late on the brakes and does well to keep Knief at bay for the time being. These two are the closest drivers out on track at the moment. Next would be Webb and Matthews, by the looks of it. In fact, there's Davis. There's Davis and Hodson. They're looking rather close at the moment out on circuit as well. Davis running along in P5. Hodson just behind here in P6 with Webb in the mix too. As we head up through San Donato with these drivers, our race leaders around about 20 seconds ahead on this lap. Let's see if Hodson can put any pressure on Davis. In terms of the times at the moment, Hodson's best lap overall isn't quite there, but Miles Davis had an issue on the previous lap, which explains why they're closed up a little bit more. But speaking of closing up a bit more, let's close in on the battle for the race lead. Final few minutes of this one, we can see that Knief is still putting that pressure on. See Knief having a look around the outside as we run toward the Blondettis there. It almost looked like he was going to get that move to stick. That's really impressive stuff. It is a narrow part of the circuit. That's something that he does have to watch out for. So that he's been able to continue on with no major challenge there. Side by side, then we go later on the brakes, carries the momentum round, but it has to go deep into the corner, into the final corner there. Knief has an attempt at taking the race victory before we even get onto the start-finish straight. Might he have been better just holding out just behind Daly potentially? Let's see as we head on to that start-finish straight. Less than 2 minutes left on the clock. I can make that pretty much 90 seconds. There's been a big bit of contact by the looks of things between John Baker and Rosie Oliver. Their cars look rather damaged, and they are now separated out. Oliver in P9, Baker in the point-scoring positions there, which is great news, as he starts his championship hopefully in both championships this season, of course. And he's running on in P10, as I say. Swarbrick and Merengue promoted up a position, as it looks like Alan Matthews has had further issues, which is a shame. Swarbrick on the fringes of the points here, so it'd be great to see him jumping back into the points scoring action, as Webb has found a way past Jack Hodson, who was putting up a chance against Davis, but Davis seems to have cleared that now and looks pretty settled. Now, where are we out on track? We are currently with our front runners who are heading through the Arabiatas at the moment, so we are getting closer and closer still to the end of this race. At the moment, Daly control things quite nicely. Ten seconds left on the clock, then these two are going to continue to fight tooth and nail. They navigate the final corner now. The timer has indeed hit 0. This is the penultimate lap of this race. We'll be heading onto the final in just a moment's time. Big contact, bad looks things further down the order by the looks of it. Merengue and Swarbrick involved in this one. Swarbrick's up into P10, into the point scoring positions now for Guy Swarbrick. This is fantastic news, as we are indeed on the final lap of this race. Whitehead's laying in waiting there. He's not too far behind at all. All the action though is going on in the low midfield at the moment. Baker, who was in with a shout of points here, ends up in the gravel. Some demolition derbies clearly been happening for a few of the drivers in the midfield here. And Baker, one of those unfortunate cars. Merengue certainly looks like one of those, as well as does Matthews, as does Swarbrick, as does Oliver. The body shop's got plenty of work after this one, I suspect. Yeah, Mugello, certainly a challenging circuit, one that I've thoroughly enjoyed commentating at over the past fortnight. As the final lap board has been shown to the drivers now, the leaders are running through Casanova and look to be a little bit more settled at the moment, as Daly worked hard in this reverse grid to claw his way up through the order and is now looking pretty strong. Mere tenths separate them, never mind a car length at all. They have been oh so close for so long in this race. They navigate their way down toward the Blondettis in just a moment. In the background is Whitehead laying in waiting for just the slight inkling of a chance. It's a really impressive drive that he's had. He's clear of so much of the other pack, but unfortunately for him, he will not start his championship hopes in the best foot forward. Race 1 didn't work out for him. I mean, P5 isn't too bad at all. At least he's on the podium. But the real stars of the show this evening, it must be said, have been Daly and Knief. I think Daly could be with the real shout of making it double race victory. Knief has done everything he can to prevent that, though. It could be too little too late. There's an immense amount of momentum for Knief, but Daly is going to be the driver who crosses the line to take race victory once again this evening. Daly P1, Knief P2. Whitehead rounds out your podium. What a brilliant weekend, what a brilliant evening's worth of racing this has been. I know we're going to get some Daily victory drifts, some Daily victory donuts. Already he's putting on a good show. Oh, he's brought it round. He's brought it round. I thought he was going to hold on to that one and it was going to look immense. It certainly looked immense in the 4C. He was managing to pull some great drifts. Fortunately, not quite gone his way, as we have some victory donuts from Whitehead there. Nathan Mahoney, apologies, I was distracted. P4, Nathan, what a drive. Doing a very impressive job. Well-deserved victory donuts there, Nathan. What a points haul for our rookie driver to kick off his Giulia GT4 running with this evening as it transpires. P4 overall. Hats off to you, sir. Some real veterans, some real strong drivers here this evening who have been usurped by yourself, sir. So, well done. Miles Davis, really fast driver as well, brings home in P5. Andy Webb in P6. These two have a knack for finishing the races around about or alongside each other. Really strong, really good to see that their pace has been so similar. They entered the AROC Racing Leagues at the same time, and from the get-go, I did say it, so I remember back that race at Silverstone, they're really close in terms of pace, and that has continued on throughout all the other running that they've done. Hodson brings it home 7th, Cole in 8th, Rosie Oliver scores some points in 9th, as does Guy Swarbrick, which is great to see, in 10th. That's followed by Matthews and Merengue bringing it home in 11th and 12th respectively. Then we have Whitney completing the running in 13th, Knight in 14th, and then Baker completes our running. Everyone on the lead lap on this one in P15. I think everyone's bringing an end to their victory donuts, so I think we've just got some victory drifts left from Matt Daly, which is the perfect time for me to say thank you very much for watching, everyone, this evening. What a fantastic bit of racing we've had this evening as well. Thank you for watching, folks. and a good night.